My name is Sam. I work at a miscellaneous goods manufacturer. The company I work for isn't very large, it's what you generally call a small to medium-sized enterprise. Though it's about the size of a small factory, I applied to this company straight out of college. I had a compelling reason for wanting to join this company. I've loved miscellaneous goods since my school days, and I'd often found myself stopping by stores whenever I saw one. Most of my allowance and part-time job earnings would go towards buying these items. Sam, you bought another quirky item. What is it this time? This was being sold in a corner of the store, but it's amazing. As I kept doing this, my friends started showing interest in the items I bought. I'd often buy obscure products that weren't yet popular and tell my friends about their appeal. Some of the items I bought, which were still unknown at the time, later became hits on social media and earned me the nickname Gadget Guru. I took pride in that nickname because it showed my love for these goods. Among all these products, my favorite ones were made by the manufacturer I now work for. The company's size may not be large, but its hit products are sold in over 1,000 stores nationwide, including major chain stores. They were apparently products that our president, Mr. Smith, came up with. They probably aligned with the trends of the times. The products sold out quickly as a result. I joined the company initially as a product planner, but no ideas other than Mr. Smith's ever get approved. There are plenty of great ideas proposed by other employees, but none of them get approved. Because no one has surpassed Mr. Smith's track record, even if it's unreasonable, no one dares to oppose him. Mr. Smith, what do you think of this product design? Sam, did I assign you to design? You know Emily handles that. If you have time, get back to your tasks. I'm sorry. I understand. I graduated from a specialized design school and love coming up with product ideas and designs. But no matter how much I appeal to Mr. Smith, I never get the chance. There's a veteran woman named Emily in the company who handles all the designs as per Mr. Smith's instructions. Emily is a gentle older woman with great skills. She's excellent at bringing Mr. Smith's ideas to life. I often talk with Emily during breaks, and we enjoy brainstorming design ideas together. I wish we could work together, Sam, but Mr. Smith is a bit stubborn. It's a shame you're doing picking work just because you're a guy. Even though you love to design. Yeah, but I'll keep trying so that one day we can work together. That's the spirit. I'm rooting for you. As Emily said, I'm not allowed to do any planning or design work. Instead, I focus on shipping, picking tasks, and sales support. Even though I joined as a planner and salesperson, I can't give up hope that someday I'll get a chance. Every night, I go home and work on product designs, carrying them around in my work bag. However, none of my submissions have ever been accepted, nor even looked at. Amidst these repetitive days, my friends from design school invited me to a gathering, and we met up for drinks on a weekend. I spent days working on a design, only for it to get rejected. It's disheartening after all that effort. I kept revising and resubmitting mine, and it finally got accepted. You just have to keep pushing. Such conversations were common. My friends, now at different companies, seemed busy but fulfilled. Sam, how about you? You looked so happy when you got that job offer. I'm doing all right, I guess. Unable to say that I'm not doing what I want, I down my drink to cover up. I felt out of place being there. When I got hired by a company that makes my favorite products, I was overjoyed to the point of tears. My friends here today celebrated with me when I received the job offer from my first choice company. But my current reality is far from the ideal life I had envisioned. My design ideas pile up, unseen by anyone, and remain sadly tucked away in my bag. The gap between my hopeful past self and my current situation makes me clench my fist under the table. I was just filled with frustration. One day, I was sent to a meeting with a major chain store that I had often visited privately for years. Usually, I'd feel a bit lighter on my feet, but today I felt unusually heavy. Today's meeting was to pitch a product idea from Mr. Smith. It's not that I dislike going to these meetings. On the contrary, being involved in the process of creating and pitching a product brings me joy. Previously, I had taken one of Mr. Smith's ideas to a meeting, but his taste is quite unique and often not very good. However, since it was his idea, no one could challenge or even suggest alternatives. Even when I took such products to meetings, the buyer's reactions were always negative. When I returned to the company to report this, Mr. Smith would get very upset. My product is undoubtedly great. Isn't it your fault that it didn't get accepted? With all due respect, Mr. Smith, while this product is in line with current trends, by the time it's produced and on the market, the trend might have shifted and there would be no demand. Are you saying my product is bad? Sam, since when did you think you could offer opinions to me? If you have time to come up with uncreative designs, you should work on improving your sales skills. Mr. Smith's sharp gaze only intensified at my words. Since then, he started targeting me. Even when I submitted requested documents, he wouldn't look at them and would demand revisions, finding fault with everything I did. He'd assign me unnecessary tasks, sometimes giving me more work than I could finish in a day, leading to late nights. I tried to appeal to him about this. Mr. Smith, it's really tough to finish this by the end of the day. You're just incompetent. If you can't finish it, stay late and get it done. He never listened to my pleas. Emily, the design specialist, was also concerned for me. But even she couldn't stand up to Mr. Smith. Eventually, I lost my brakes and no longer had time to talk with her. When I stepped out of the company, the fresh air was a relief. But I didn't feel optimistic about today's meeting and was quickly overcome with a sense of dread. I decided to take a shortcut through a one-way street. With fewer cars and traffic lights, and hardly any people, I thought it might help clear my head. Just then, a loud crash behind me made me turn around. A car had collided with a telephone pole. I'd never witnessed an accident before, and with no one else around, I panicked. But when I saw no one emerging from the car, I ran towards it. I couldn't see the driver's face due to the airbags, but I saw a woman slumped over in the driver's seat. I checked the back seat and found she was the only one in the car. I immediately opened the door and spoke to her. "Are you okay? Can you hear me?" She slowly raised herself and responded, "I'm okay." I blacked out while driving. Relieved that she was conscious, I sighed. I should call the police, but I can't find my phone." She seemed disoriented, likely from the accident. I quickly reassured her. "It's okay. I'll call the police. Here, have some water, I haven't opened it yet. It'll help you calm down." I handed her the water I had bought earlier, and since I was the only witness, I called the police and an ambulance from my phone. She seemed calmer by the time I finished the call and bowed deeply to me. "Thank you for helping me. My name is Natalie. I think I was sleep deprived from working on a college report. Thank you for everything. May I ask your name?" Natalie seemed to be a college student, and I couldn't just leave her alone, so I introduced myself. "I'm glad you're okay, Natalie. I'm Sam. Sorry, I need to make a quick work call while we wait for the police." She nodded emphatically and said, "That's fine." So I called the client I was supposed to meet. After explaining the situation, they understood and agreed to reschedule. Next, I called my company, and the receptionist connected me to Mr. Smith. "Mr. Smith, I'm sorry. I encountered an accident on my way to the meeting and am currently waiting for the police. I've explained the situation to the client, and they've agreed to reschedule. Given the circumstances, it might take me some time to return to the office." After explaining the situation concisely, an unexpected response came through the phone. "Sam, are you kidding me? Do you realize how much revenue this meeting could generate? Being late because of an accident you encountered? Rescheduling without permission is unacceptable. You should have ignored the accident." "But Mr. Smith, I couldn't just ignore someone in need. That's inhumane." Despite my attempt to reason, he had no intention of listening and shouted over me. "I won't tolerate lateness. You're fired." His voice was deafening, and with a loud click, the call ended abruptly. In an instant, I found myself unemployed. Fired. Staring blankly at the silent phone, I was stunned. Natalie, who had witnessed everything, approached with a worried expression. "I'm sorry, I overheard the call. It's my fault, isn't it?" Her eyes were filled with tears as she apologized. "No, it's not a problem at all. Leaving someone in need would be the real issue. I tried to smile reassuringly as I spoke to her. The conflict with Mr. Smith had been ongoing, and he had been targeting me ever since our earlier disputes. Given the situation, this might actually be a good opportunity to move on. Staying in that company wouldn't let me do what I truly wanted. Natalie seemed to think my words were just to make her feel better. I'm really sorry that you got caught up in my accident. She bowed deeply again and, after a brief moment, took out her phone to make a call. Dad, it's Natalie. I was in an accident. It seemed she was calling her parents. Not wanting to eavesdrop, I considered stepping away, but the police arrived and began their investigation. By then, Natalie had finished her call and was calmly speaking with the police. The paramedics also arrived, and while they checked on Natalie, it was confirmed she wasn't injured. The investigation went smoothly without any issues. Since they were arranging a tow truck for her car, I decided to stay with her until it arrived. Just then, several luxury cars began to pull up in front of us. A man hurriedly got out of one of the cars. Natalie, are you okay? Yes, I'm fine. This gentleman helped me. The man, clearly worried, rushed over to Natalie. I was taken aback by the sudden turn of events. Unlike me, Natalie calmly explained the situation to the man. Unable to fully grasp what was happening, I stood there in shock as the man turned to me and bowed deeply. Thank you for helping, Natalie. My name is. He expressed his gratitude and handed me his business card. Caught off guard, I fumbled to retrieve a business card from my bag, but in my haste, I accidentally spilled its contents all over the ground. Among the scattered items were not only the documents I was supposed to submit but also the product ideas and designs I had painstakingly worked on night after night. I'm so sorry. As I knelt to pick up the scattered papers, another hand appeared in my view. A smaller hand than mine started helping me pick up the scattered papers. It was Natalie. Is this everything? These products were designed by you? They're wonderful. She smiled as she handed me the gathered papers. With a sweet smile, she said my ideas were wonderful. The fact that she appreciated my work filled me with joy, and I couldn't help but grip the stack of papers a bit tighter. These are designs that have never been approved, let alone seen by anyone at my company. They're practically just a hobby at this point. Thank you for your kind words. It means a lot to me. I see. Natalie looked sad as I explained. Even though I tried to smile, perhaps my face showed how pathetic I felt. The products I had thought about daily might never see the light of day now that I had been fired. The thought made my chest ache. As I packed up my papers, Natalie and the man were discussing something. When I looked up, Natalie walked over to me. Sam, if you don't mind, I'd like to thank you. Do you have some time after this? I had been fired by Mr. Smith. I had no work left to do. I had plenty of time. Even though I had many problems to deal with. I didn't need any thanks, but I felt it would be rude to refuse Natalie, who was looking at me so earnestly. I don't need any thanks, but I have plenty of time, so sure. Her face lit up at my response, and I found myself smiling too. So, I decided to follow her. The place Natalie brought me to was, surprisingly, the company where I work. Or rather, my former workplace since I'd been fired. Before I could ask why we were here, Natalie confidently walked into the building. Sam, where's the meeting room? Still unable to ask her anything, I guided her to the meeting room. The employees stared at us, wondering what was going on. When we reached the meeting room, she knocked briefly and entered before a response came. I had no idea who was inside, and hurried to follow her, only to be met with an unexpected sight. Mr. Smith was there, talking to an unfamiliar man. But that wasn't all. Mr. Smith was bowing his head looking scared. The man noticed Natalie and me immediately and addressed her. Natalie, are you okay? Dad. I had the paramedics check me out and I'm fine. Thanks to Sam here. It turns out the man was Natalie's father. But I felt like I had seen him somewhere before. Where had I seen him before? As I pondered this, Natalie's father bowed his head to me. Sam, right? Thank you for helping my daughter. I'm so grateful for your kindness. This is a debt I can never fully repay. Thank you. I just did what anyone would do. I'm glad your daughter is safe. The man gave me a kind smile. Not everyone would think it was their duty. You're a kind person, Sam. I can assure you of that. Natalie nodded vigorously beside him. His words, spoken with such conviction, made my face flush with warmth. To hide my embarrassment, I took out my business card. Let me formally introduce myself. I'm Sam. I used to handle product planning and sales for miscellaneous goods at this company. I started to introduce myself, but I suddenly found myself at a loss for words. Having been fired, I no longer had the right to use the business card with this company's name on it. I considered lowering my hand holding the card, wondering if it would be disrespectful, and as I hesitated, I remained frozen in a bow. A hand on my shoulder snapped me out of my daze, and I looked up. You don't need to be so formal. I'm David Williams, Natalie's father and the president of the company you were supposed to visit today. Nice to meet you. His words brought back my memory. Yes, he was the president of the large household goods chain I was supposed to visit today. I hadn't had a conversation with him before, but I had seen him a few times. I never expected him to be the president though. When the accident happened, I remembered seeing the same company name on the business card of the man who got out of the car to help me. However, in the midst of the commotion, I hadn't fully confirmed it. I couldn't believe the president of the store I frequented was standing before me, and I stiffened. Dad, when I had an accident, Sam was the one who helped me immediately. It was a quiet street, so there were no other witnesses. But he called the police and ambulance for me while I was panicking. He even canceled his plans to visit your company to stay with me and make sure everything went smoothly. Natalie glanced at me and then continued speaking to Mr. Williams. But because of that, Sam ended up getting fired from his job. Mr. Williams listened to her words and turned towards the shrinking Mr. Smith. Getting fired for being late to a meeting because you helped someone after witnessing an accident? What a commendable company policy. Though Mr. Williams's tone was cheerful, his eyes were not smiling at all. Breaking into a cold sweat from Mr. Williams's sarcastic remark, Mr. Smith hesitantly opened his mouth to speak. No, I only reprimanded Sam for his attitude towards his work. I never intended to actually fire him. Encountering an accident and responding correctly is something I admire in an employee. That's why I entrusted the meeting with your company to him. As I thought about how quickly Mr. Smith came up with excuses, Natalie stepped forward before I could say anything. Sorry to interrupt, but I overheard you talking to Sam on the phone. You said to ignore the accident. After finishing his excuse and feeling a brief sense of relief, Mr. Smith turned his gaze towards Natalie and tensed up. However, she didn't stop. Sam told you he couldn't just ignore it. And I distinctly heard you say the word fired in response. That's how I remember it. Well, that is. Mr. Smith had no words to respond to Natalie's statement and appeared visibly uneasy. His face was not just sweaty but completely pale. Mr. Williams, who had been quietly listening, nodded slightly and turned to Mr. Smith. So, Sam is currently without a job, correct? And from what I hear, he's quite talented in product planning and design. Yet your company hasn't given him the opportunity to showcase his skills. Is that correct? Being suddenly praised for my abilities made me feel a bit uneasy. Mr. Smith, who was just as uneasy for a different reason, forced a smile. Well, we've been having him work on basic tasks as preparation for future projects. Mr. Smith's words brought back memories of all the harassment I had endured under him. Basic tasks? That was far from the truth. I joined this company because I admired its miscellaneous goods. I graduated from design school and joined this company with the intention of applying everything I learned here. I've been happy to do picking and sales support work, believing that one day I would be involved in planning and design. Gathering my courage, I addressed Mr. Smith's remarks. Sam. Mr. Smith glared at me, as if warning me not to say anything more. But I was no longer afraid. As the president of a company that had fired me, Mr. Smith was no longer someone I had to answer to. But you haven't even listened to my proposals or those of other employees. You reject our plans without even reviewing them. And every document I've submitted has been returned with corrections. For 4 years, I've been doing basic tasks. Not getting a single opportunity to work on planning or design. Is that all considered preparation? I poured out all my frustrations in one breath. I was no longer afraid of Mr. Smith. Mr. Williams, who had been watching the situation, smiled at me. Sam, I'd like to see the designs Natalie mentioned. Would that be all right? Yes, of course. In a hurry, I pulled out a stack of papers from my bag and handed them to him. Mr. Williams skimmed through them, nodding as he went. Just as Natalie said, you have a lot of talent. So, Sam, with no obstacles in your way, would you consider joining us as a product planning and design specialist? We not only source products from manufacturers but also develop our own original items. We welcome talented individuals like you. Mr. Williams extended his hand to me as he spoke. Mr. Smith, the president of my former company, seemed like he wanted to say something, but I cut him off by shaking Mr. Williams's hand. Yes. I'd be honored. And so, I began working in product planning and design at the large household goods chain managed by Mr. Williams. As I started the job, I realized that product design was more challenging and required more knowledge than I had anticipated. Understanding the differences in materials and their costs and properties was crucial. Even the same product could have different limitations depending on the manufacturing process. Without this knowledge, it was impossible to design safe and user-friendly products. A design that looked good on screen might turn out to be flawed when the sample was produced. For instance, plastics like polyethylene and acrylic resin have different strengths, transparency, and costs. You need to consider these factors in your design. This design could cause injuries to customers on the backside due to the manufacturing process. You need to modify it to avoid that. I received such feedback on my designs daily. I was learning new things that I couldn't have experienced at my previous company. It was tough, but I found it enjoyable and rewarding. Previously, my days were consumed by work with no time to spare. But now I found myself looking at products from a new perspective during shopping trips. I started to notice how things were made and what materials were used. I also began to appreciate the small details and design tweaks more often. I would jot down these observations in a notebook and use them to brainstorm new product ideas. While my life had become more work-centric, each day was filled with new discoveries, making it very enjoyable. Furthermore, my new role in product planning and design led to more opportunities to visit overseas factories. There are many things you don't notice when working solely in the US, such as the cultural and mindset differences, as well as numerous business opportunities. I even had the chance to be present when my previous company came to propose products. Mr. Smith, the president of my former company, came personally to make the proposal. We would appreciate Sam's feedback on our proposed products from a design perspective. It was an awkward moment as the person who once looked down on me was now facing me in a reversed role. Since I joined this company, the annual average sales of the products I designed have already exceeded the annual revenue of my previous company. So Mr. Smith might think he lost out on a big opportunity. He looked a bit regretful. Of course, I judged the proposal fairly, without letting personal feelings interfere. Actually, Emily informed me that since my incident, Mr. Smith has become more subdued and is now more willing to listen to others' opinions. Mr. Smith used to listen carefully to his employees' opinions when developing products that built his track record. His overconfidence led to the situation, but he might bring better products in the future, created collaboratively with his team. Not as a product created solely by Mr. Smith, but as one made collaboratively by the whole company. Sure, there were challenges, but it was a company that produced the miscellaneous goods I loved. Even though things turned out differently, I wanted to strive to do my best alongside them. In addition to work, my personal life was also flourishing. The accident led to me dating Natalie. After graduating from college, Natalie joined the same company as a sales assistant. Though we worked in different departments, we would often return home together or have dinner, making every day feel more colorful. Natalie, who had recognized and praised my design work, continued to support me. One fond memory was when I took her to a household goods store for our date, and she burst into laughter. You really love household goods, don't you, Sam? I love them too, so I'll go along with you as long as you want. Natalie never criticized me, always smiling and staying by my side. Mr. Williams has been supportive both professionally and personally, and I'm fortunate to have great colleagues. At my previous company, everyone avoided associating with me since I was singled out. Now, if I run into any problems, my colleagues immediately offer help, and they give me valuable advice to get my ideas approved. Though we are all competitors, we are also teammates, and they celebrated with me when my first project was accepted. The change in my work environment has also made it enjoyable to attend gatherings with my old classmates, which used to feel uncomfortable. When they said, "Your atmosphere has changed," I ended up sharing my journey with them. "Sam, you changed jobs? You look much happier now. Sorry for the way we acted before. If anything comes up, make sure to talk to us." My friends listened earnestly to my story, appreciating my experiences and offering their support. They were angry about what happened at my previous company, and they were surprised but happy for me when I told them about my new job. I learned a lot from conversations I previously couldn't even participate in. We learned from and encouraged each other. I realized I should have talked to them sooner. They are important friends and professional rivals to me after all. They had been watching over me even when they were busy. Thanks to the support of those around me, I am now leading a fulfilling life. I've worked hard over the years. There were times I thought no one would ever appreciate my efforts. But there are always people who notice. I want to always remember this sense of gratitude. When you make positive changes in yourself, your environment and the people around you change as well. While striving for improvement every day, I am now enjoying my life to the fullest. This guy is just an errand boy. It was Joshua, my 37-year-old manager, who said that about me. The day the CEO from the overseas headquarters visited, Joshua and I took him to a fancy restaurant. Suddenly, the CEO started staring intently at me. Then, the CEO revealed my true identity. "My name is John, and I'm 53 years old. While working at a life insurance company, I had been caring for my mother, but she developed dementia and had to move into a nursing home. I quit my job to care for her, but it became too lonely being at home alone, so at 53, I luckily got hired in the general affairs department of a large company. However, Joshua considered me an incompetent old man and didn't like me. Now, let's reflect on my complex life, which has passed its halfway point. I was born to a father who ran a small business and a stay-at-home mother. When I was 3, my father's business was failing, and he suddenly passed away from an illness. I was 3 then, and I have hardly any memories of that time. I vaguely remember a brother-like figure who was always with me. He was probably a neighborhood friend. By the time I was aware of my surroundings, my mother and I were living in a small apartment on government support, and she had a heart condition. Caring for me was too difficult for my mother, so I was placed in a children's home. That was when I was 4 years old. My mother probably saw me off with a forced smile. I faintly remember her smiling and waving goodbye. At the home, I shared a room with a boy named Bobby, who was the same age as me, and I cried constantly. I thought I could go home in the evening. When I realized I couldn't, I refused to eat and stayed under the bed. For a while, I couldn't eat at all. I stayed in the room and cried all the time. The others called me crybaby, but Bobby would drag me to the big hall, saying, "Hey, John, let's play." Everyone shouted, "Crybaby's here," but Bobby would say, "Everyone cried at first too." Then an older boy brought me a picture book and read it to me. I was captivated by the book, and gradually, the caregivers read more picture books to me, and I started eating with everyone. Gradually, I was able to sleep. Sometimes I dreamed of my mother and woke up crying in the morning. "John, are you okay? It's time for breakfast. I've been here since I was a baby, so we're like brothers." "Yeah, I'm okay." "You don't have parents either, Bobby?" "No. Maybe they are somewhere." At just 5 years old, we had such conversations. Then I entered elementary school. I had a rather large mole between my eyebrows, and at school, I was bullied. Called a parentless Buddha statue or told touching me would bring bad luck. Bobby would defend me, saying, "I'm always with him and nothing bad happens," but we were still outcasts. An older boy from the home warned me to ignore what others say, so I was somewhat prepared. As those days passed, when I was in 3rd grade, a blond boy named Sam joined the home. His eyes were a clear blue, and he didn't seem to speak much Japanese. Sam was in the room next to mine, always reading many English books his father had given him. I loved books, so I approached Sam, saying, "Tell me what these say." Sam nodded and said, "Yes. Then Sam simply said, "I don't understand Japanese." From then on, Bobby and I talked to Sam a lot. Sam gradually learned Japanese, and Bobby and I slowly learned English. Sam had come to Japan with his father after his mother passed away in the US, and his father's busy work schedule brought him to our home. At school, Sam, Bobby, and I were in the same class, and during breaks, Bobby and I would help Sam with language arts and math, mixing in English. Through this, we all developed a love for studying. Sam occasionally received English books from his father, and Bobby and I were fascinated by them. During meals, Sam would teach us the names of fruits and vegetables in English, making mealtime enjoyable. During summer break, Sam intensively taught us English, and we spent our days translating English books into Japanese and discussing them with Sam. We also helped Sam with his summer homework, and gradually, Bobby and I started to speak some English. In middle school, Bobby and I had excellent grades. Sam, who had become quite proficient in Japanese, would ask us about kanji for his language arts classes, and his grades improved as well. Even after returning to the home, the three of us devoted ourselves to studying. We smoothly passed our high school entrance exams. We graduated at the top of our class in high school. However, after graduating from high school, we had to part ways. The farewell was very sad. We had supported each other like brothers, or even more than brothers. I secured a job at a life insurance company, Bobby got a job at a publishing company, and Sam was hired at his father's company. Bobby was happy about getting company housing. Then, graduation day came. Amidst the early blooming of cherry blossoms in spring break, a luxury car arrived at the home. It was Sam's father. We greeted everyone, including Mr. Carter, the head of the children's home, and then returned to our homes. Sam's father wanted to thank us personally, so Bobby and I saw Sam off. Bobby and I held back our tears as we were each driven home in the children's home's car. When I got home, my mother cried with joy and apologized to me. Looking much older than I remembered, my mother said, "John, I'm sorry for all the hardship you went through." "Mom, are you okay?" For me, living at the home wasn't hard at all. It must have been tougher for you, being alone. But I'm here now. I have a job. And we don't need government support anymore. As I said this, the tears I had been holding back streamed down my face, and I hugged my frail mother. That day, my mother splurged on meat and made beef stew. Apparently, if she had heart surgery, she could improve significantly, but being old-fashioned, she refused further government help. Bobby, Sam, and I exchanged addresses. One day, Sam and his father visited us. It was just before the entrance ceremony for our jobs. "My son Sam is very grateful to you, John," Sam's father said, handing my mother a business card. Later, we found out that Sam's father was the son of a real estate mogul in the US and had come to Japan for resort development. And the Japanese facility wasn't free for them. It seems Bobby and I had been under government care. Sam's father took my mother and me to Bobby's company housing, and the five of us went to a family restaurant. Sam's father had something to discuss. After the meal, he said, "You boys are very good at studying. Sam's Japanese has improved thanks to you." "No, we learned a lot of English from Sam," I replied. "Me too," Bobby added. "That's natural. Without you, Sam would have had a lonely school life," Sam's father said in fluent Japanese. He continued, "How would you like to attend university in the US?" What? Bobby and I were surprised. My mother said, "We don't have that kind of money. Don't worry about the money. My father passed away, and I've taken over his business. I'm returning to the US with Sam. And I want you boys to further your education. So please, don't worry about the expenses." But the five of us fell silent. I broke the silence. "Mr. Thompson, thank you. Actually, my mother has a heart condition, and I want to stay by her side." "Is your mother's condition serious?" "Yes, she can get better with surgery, and I plan to work so she can have it." "In that case, I know a doctor. You should act quickly. Please, come to the US. As I mentioned before, John, you can pay me back later." "What?" I was even more surprised. And I pondered. I wanted my mother to get well. "Mr. Thompson, thank you for offering to let me pay you back later. I'll gratefully accept your help." When I said that and bowed, Sam and his father smiled warmly. Meanwhile, Bobby was still unsure. I've been in the children's home since I was born, and I still don't know much about Japan. So, I think I want to stay here. I see. Then I want you to go to university in Japan. It's still quite a credential-oriented society here, Sam's father said. He handed Bobby a large envelope as if he had it prepared in advance. Bobby took it and was astonished. The contents of Sam's father's attaché case seemed to be detailed inside. It appeared to be a substantial amount of money, enough to attend university. Bobby was. I'm surprised. Can I also pay you back later? Of course. You've had a hard time too. Enjoy your university life. Afterwards, on the way home, Sam's father told Bobby to get a seal for his bank account and took him to the bank to deposit the money for safety. Bobby declined the job offer, rented a small apartment, worked part-time, and studied hard. A year later, he was accepted into Tokyo University. He worked as a tutor while paying back Sam's father bit by bit, but Sam's father didn't accept the payments. As for me, I declined the job offer and went to California with my mother and Sam's family. We stayed at Sam's mansion for a while. Despite being a bit late, Sam and I were both accepted into the prestigious UCLA. And so, we became university students. My mother underwent successful heart surgery, thanks to a doctor recommended by Sam's father. She recovered gradually while resting. The university required TOEFL and SAT exams, but Sam's father helped us with English conversation, business English, and grammar. Sam's father, with tears in his eyes, said, I couldn't save my wife, but I'm glad John's mother is getting better. What a compassionate man he was. We lived in a place called Little Tokyo in California. California is surrounded by natural beauty like beaches, mountains, and deserts. Little Tokyo is a Japanese-style town reminiscent of the Meiji era, with many Japanese residents and tourists. The murals in the neighboring town were captivating. The university was less than an hour away by bus, which felt like a dream. My mother felt guilty staying idle and started working at a souvenir shop in Little Tokyo. It was also part of Sam's father's property. As an international student, I couldn't work outside the campus, but campus jobs were allowed, so we managed on our own. However, Sam's father never accepted rent or tuition from us. Sam and I enjoyed our university life, spending summers working and having fun at the beach, even dating, and we graduated together in 4 years. After graduation, Sam and I helped with sales at Sam's father's real estate company. Sam got his driver's license early, and we often went out together. The souvenir shop my mother worked at was popular, and we had no trouble making ends meet. She was very happy to be able to work, and her once gaunt cheeks filled out as she started eating well. Although I received a salary from our sales work, I wanted to use it to pay for my tuition, but Sam's father wouldn't accept it. He said it was because he always wanted another child. Sam's father's company was a large corporation, and Sam assured me that I didn't need to worry about money. I received an airmail from Bobby, saying he had graduated and secured a job at a major publishing company. It was a time when conversations were carried out through letters or phone calls, as mobile phones were not yet common. I spent my 20s running around the US working in real estate sales. My sales performance was good, and I wanted to repay Sam's father in some way. Before I knew it, I had picked up a native English accent during my university years. One day, my mother received an airmail from Japan. It said that her sister was now alone and needed care. While I was in the home, my mother had relied on her sister for shopping and household chores. When I told Sam and his father about this, they encouraged me to return to Japan. By then, mobile phones and the internet were widespread, and I had received an airmail from Bobby with his email address. We started communicating via email, and I shared my email address with Sam, deeply bowing to thank his father before returning to Japan. My mother and I rented a small apartment near my aunt. In Japan, I joined a life insurance company, and Sam occasionally visited us from the US. At the insurance company, I shared my background only with the CEO, Mr. Taylor, and soon started running around in sales. The sales style was different from the US, so I began by learning from my seniors. I gradually improved my sales performance but never indulged in luxury. That was life for my mother and me. When my aunt entered a special nursing home, my mother started working part-time in a factory. The seasons changed quickly. Meeting Sam had changed my life, and I couldn't help but be amazed by it. I was already 50 years old. Sam had married in the US and had a happy family. I had become the CEO of Sam's father's company's branch in Japan. However, I mostly delegated tasks to employees, only reviewing documents and sending them to Sam via computer. Then, when my mother turned 73, she became bedridden due to a compression fracture in her back. I quit my job at the insurance company to care for her. I was offered a position in the general affairs department, but my mother was my only family. Still single due to my busy work life, I devoted myself to caring for her. Although she initially improved, she eventually developed severe dementia. I was 53 years old. Her dementia was quite advanced. I placed my mother in a nursing home. A nearby nursing home had a vacancy, but my mother gradually began to forget who I was. Living alone in the apartment, I recalled my younger self crying in the children's home. I managed the company with the help of the property management company and employees, with minimal work involving year-end settlements and correspondence. Bobby had become a department head at a publishing company and had children in college. I felt the urge for the three of us to meet again. Sam's father had become chairman, and Sam was now CEO of the company in the US. Sam's daughter was attending our alma mater. I asked Sam if he could come to Japan. I arranged to meet with Bobby and Sam at a fancy restaurant. Bobby and I split the bill. I picked up Sam from the airport, and we hugged joyfully at Haneda. I arranged Sam's accommodations. After resting for a night to adjust to the time difference, we enjoyed a leisurely day of shopping like children. At the restaurant that night, Sam said, "So your mother is in a nursing home now? You didn't end up with your girlfriend in the US, huh?" "No, she didn't want to come to Japan. Anyway, Sam and your father have been incredibly helpful to us." "It's fine. My father was just lonely. No matter how much money you have, without family, there's no dream or hope. All he had left was taking over my grandfather's business. He wanted us young ones to have dreams." "I see. I'm alone again now. I have time on my hands, and at 53, I'm looking for a job other than being a CEO. Yes, you've taken good care of the Japan branch, but the few employees we have are very competent. I don't know how to feel about my daughter getting a boyfriend." "Yeah, I get it. I have a daughter too." We enjoyed our meal with such conversations. Then Sam said, "You know, I have a connection at a foreign life insurance company dealing with real estate claims. Their branch is nearby. Should I introduce you?" "Really? That would be great. I can't handle sales anymore, but I could do an office job." Sam immediately called Mr. Smith, the CEO of KM Corporation, and introduced me. An interview was set up for the following week. Sam explained my background and my current role as CEO to Mr. Smith, and my history was kept confidential, known only to Mr. Smith and a few in HR. Sam enjoyed his long-missed Japanese food, and as Bobby's vacation ended, we saw Sam off at the airport. I had my interview at KM Corporation and was soon hired into the General Affairs Department. I introduced myself and took my seat at my desk. The office included a very young, late-30s elite manager named Joshua, who graduated from Tokyo University. The department head was a woman named Michelle, who appeared to be around 40. Michelle was very beautiful and had a strong career woman vibe. In his initial greeting, Joshua introduced himself as a Tokyo University graduate. Ah, credentialism. What a pity. I realized it instantly. Even though I had attended university thanks to Sam's father, the US was merit-based, as was my previous insurance company. Despite being a foreign company, Joshua's young age combined with his credentialism was disheartening. While I was typing at my desk, Joshua said, "Hey, you old mid-career hire. Get some coffee for everyone." "Yes, Joshua." Right away, I replied. Michelle interjected, "Joshua, watch your tone. You can't speak to a senior like that. John has a proper name. I'll get the coffee myself." "Michelle, the department head shouldn't be getting coffee." "John, I'll get it today." I bowed my head to Michelle and sat back down. "John, apologize to Michelle," Joshua ordered. "Oh, yes. I apologized to Michelle when she brought the coffee. She smiled warmly and said, "It's okay. I need the exercise." During lunch break, I ate a convenience store bento at my desk. Michelle always went out for lunch. Joshua seemed to have a homemade lunch. "Hey, John. Are you seriously single at your age, eating convenience store food?" "That's pathetic." "Yes, I'm single. But I don't mind," I retorted. Joshua looked puzzled as he ate his homemade lunch. After lunch, Joshua said, "Hey, John. Make 50 copies of this." "Yes, right away." I went to the copy room and looked at the contents of the document. I immediately realized it was an important copy. This foreign company collaborated with financial firms, using credit card information for phone sales. It was a legitimate partnership, so there was no problem. Thus, sales were done entirely over the phone. Employees spent their time making call after call. There were no field sales. I created and mailed documents for the contracted clients. It wasn't too busy. I logged into a different app on my computer and could see information about the properties I was managing. There were female employees who acted mostly as operators. When Michelle went out, Joshua said, "Hey, John. You look bored. Why don't you clean the building today?" "Yes, Joshua." Even though I was constantly assigned menial tasks, it wasn't a burden compared to my previous job. I chatted with the cleaning lady and helped her clean the entrance. Just then, Michelle returned. "John. What are you doing? The cleaning is supposed to be done by the cleaning staff. Please return to your desk immediately." "Oh, Michelle. Joshua instructed me to do this, and besides, I could use the exercise," I replied. "Oh, I see," Michelle said as she walked back to the office. Once the cleaning was mostly done, I returned to the office. Suddenly, Joshua dropped a thick stack of documents on my desk and said, "John, this is today's paperwork. Finish it by the end of the day." "Understood," I said, speeding up my typing on the keyboard. I was already familiar with using a computer from my previous job. I managed to finish the work with some overtime. Joshua left promptly. I received an encouraging internal email from Michelle, saying, "Keep up the good work." At 7 p.m., I finished and went to a diner before heading home. Joshua might act superior, but I enjoyed working, and being busy was better than being bored at home. Compared to the busy life of sales, menial tasks were nothing. One day, Michelle invited me to dinner through an internal email. I responded that I'd be happy to join her, even if it was just a family restaurant. When Michelle arrived, she let down her tied-up hair, and her sleek black hair shone. I felt a slight flutter. "John, sorry for the sudden invitation. I'm single too and thought it would be better to have company for dinner," she said. "That's an honor," I replied. We ordered and had a meal together. Joshua can be quite arrogant, can't he? He's always been like that with new hires, and some have even quit because of him. I often warn him, but..." she explained. "Is that so?" "Well, he did mention graduating from Tokyo University. Given my age and being a mid-career hire, it's understandable that he might look down on me," I said. "Really?" "But..." I reported it to Mr. Smith, she said with a mischievous smile. After that, she asked, "Can we have dinner like this sometimes? That makes me happy." "Of course, Michelle." I said that and felt my face warm up a bit. We started going out for meals frequently, and eventually, Michelle and I began dating, spending weekends watching movies and shopping together. One day, Michelle told Joshua, "Joshua, the CEO from the overseas headquarters is coming tomorrow. Arrange for a nice restaurant immediately. And you and John are invited." "What? The company CEO?" "Understood, Michelle." Joshua immediately called to make a reservation at the nice restaurant as Michelle instructed. I wondered what business the CEO had with me. I found it quite puzzling. Then, the following evening, it was a bright night with a beautiful autumn full moon. The restaurant we arrived at was the same one I had visited with Sam and the others before. Joshua and I nervously headed to the restaurant. Then, the sliding door opened. A Japanese man, around my age and dressed in an obviously expensive suit, entered. I had expected an American, so I was surprised. Joshua greeted him. "Thank you, sir, for coming from afar." "Thank you. I plan to relax a bit here in Japan." "How are things?" "Everything is going smoothly." "And you are?" the CEO said, turning to me. Joshua interjected, "Oh, he's just an errand boy." "No, Joshua. I wasn't asking you." The CEO directed his attention to me. "I'm John, a mid-career hire," I introduced myself. "Nice to meet you, John," Mr. Davis said, extending his hand. I responded with a firm handshake. Then, I received a business card from him. It read Robert Davis. After a moment, Mr. Davis asked Joshua, "Is John really just an errand boy?" "Yes, that's right. Since he's a mid-career hire, he's handling various tasks for now." You have assigned John as an errand boy." "Joshua, do you realize who you're talking about?" "Excuse me?" Joshua's eyes widened. Mr. Davis continued, "Joshua, you might be a Tokyo University graduate, but it seems you lack the ability to judge people." "John, I'm sorry, but I did some research on you." "What?" "You graduated from UCLA and were an excellent salesperson in the US. Did you enjoy your time there?" "Yes, Mr. Davis, it was a very rewarding experience." "Did Sam tell you about it?" "Yes, Sam told me everything. I also did some additional research." "How is your mother?" "She's in a nursing home, but I visit her twice a week." "She's doing well, thank you." "I see, that's good," Mr. Davis said, looking a bit melancholic. As the food arrived, Joshua muttered, "I didn't know about UCLA." "I'm sorry. Do you always judge people solely by their educational background, Joshua?" "The US is merit-based. Most of our clients here in Japan are elderly. Referring to someone as just an errand boy is unacceptable." "Joshua, you're demoted to a regular employee. John, starting tomorrow, you will be the branch manager." "What? Me, the branch manager?" "Yes. The current branch manager is an American and he wants to return home. I want you to take over." "I am honored." "Thank you. I will do my best." "Mr. Davis, I'm truly sorry. I beg you, please don't demote me. I have a wife and children." Joshua pleaded, bowing deeply. He then bowed to me, apologizing as well. "Mr. Davis, Joshua has apologized sincerely. I will keep an eye on him from now on," I said, feeling a bit conflicted. And at that moment, a realization struck me. "John, you truly have a big heart." "If you say so." Mr. Davis agreed. Joshua thanked us with tears in his eyes. "Now, let's enjoy this Japanese meal." "Take your time," Mr. Davis said with a smile, and Joshua poured him some sake. We chatted about recent topics and ended the dinner on a pleasant note. After seeing Joshua off, Mr. Davis called out to me. "John, I have something important to discuss. Could you come to my hotel?" I agreed and followed him. In a room on a high floor, Mr. Davis spoke to me. "John, you've had a tough time." He placed 2 packs of shrimp crackers and beers on the table. Shrimp crackers. They were the snacks my mother used to give me when I was hungry. I realized the boy who felt like a friend back then was. I clutched the pack of crackers, tears welling up. "Brother, do you remember? Our family used to share these. Our mother said the mole on your forehead would bring good fortune. She had a sister who didn't have children, and her husband worked at a big company. I was adopted into their family. My uncle forbade me from seeing our mother, who was on government support, and I couldn't see her for a long time. I received an elite education and started a company in the US. I learned about you from Sam and repaid Sam's father for your university and mother's surgery. I've wanted to see you so much. Please, let me see our mother tomorrow." My brother said. We embraced, crying together. The full moon's light shone brightly through the window, celebrating our reunion. The next day, with shrimp crackers in hand, Robert and I visited our mother. Although she no longer recognized either of us, Robert held her tightly, crying, "Mom! Mom!" She smiled and happily ate the shrimp crackers. Afterward, I saw Robert off at the airport, and the following day, I started working as the branch manager for Sam's company. And for Robert's company as well. Michelle proposed to me, and we got married, buying a spacious apartment. The next year, despite being an older mother, Michelle gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, and now the three of us live happily together. No one can live alone. I realized once again how much I am supported by various people, and I felt deep gratitude for it. I quietly vowed to work hard for my family's sake in the future. My name is Thomas, and I'm 30 years old. I currently work as an employee at an IT company. I live alone in Tokyo. My hobby is reading. Especially, reading books at a cafe is my happiest time. I have loved reading since I was a child. Books teach me a lot of knowledge. They show me worlds I've never seen. Books are a guide to success in life. When I was young, smartphones were already popular, but my parents didn't let me have one, so I worked part-time in high school to buy my own. Many of my peers had phones since middle school, and they enjoyed watching trending videos together. Of course, I was envious. But I loved reading books just as much, and my parents would buy me any book I wanted, so I didn't grow up resentful. I read books of any genre. Novels, essays, history, and self-help books. Thanks to that, even though I didn't study much, I always had excellent grades in school. Probably because reading improved my comprehension skills, I understood the questions on any test. However, just reading Japanese books didn't help me with English. After exhausting my interest in Japanese books, I reached out to English books. I started with simple children's picture books. At that time, I wasn't interested in novels, but I could read simpler books. In Japan, many schools are now focusing on education speaking in English, but during my school days, speaking and listening were still weak points for most students. However, once I got my phone in high school and watched many English YouTube videos, my knowledge grew rapidly. I enjoyed it. And my English became one of the best in my class. Some YouTube videos detailed the English books I was interested in, which made me like English even more. Although I was an introvert who loved reading, my excellent grades led to a few girls confessing their feelings to me during school. Even though I spent breaks reading at my desk, apparently, some found that appealing. But if my grades were poor, no one would have paid any attention to me. Still, having read many books and having a mature mindset, I couldn't bring myself to like my classmates just because they lived nearby and attended the same school. No matter how attractive they were. I thought it would be boring to be with someone who couldn't see things from my perspective. Then, in high school, I encountered a book that changed my life. I was 17 at the time. 13 years have passed since then. Now at 30, I have been working at an IT company for about 4 years. Honestly, I haven't been getting along well with my colleagues here. But that's partly because I hid my educational background and most of my identity when I joined, hoping to do better after failing at my first job. I intended to act incompetent. I joined this company with a high school graduate resume. My previous job was at a trading company. I quit after 2 years. But apparently, I got this job because my previous trading company experience was impressive. When I joined, Kenneth, my supervisor, said, "We didn't really need a high school grad here. You're not even a new graduate. But because of your previous job at the trading company, we had no choice but to hire you." That's what HR said. Be careful, we value academic credentials here. It's President Kimball's policy. Hearing that, I regretted hiding my education, but I also thought, if they had such a bad attitude, they shouldn't have hired me. It was unpleasant. As Kenneth said, new hires like me were discriminated against based on our academic backgrounds. Whether we were capable or not didn't matter. The company also had a seniority system, and people who couldn't do their jobs were in charge, pushing their work onto quick workers like me. Hey, high school grad. They stopped calling me by my name. Other high school graduates, technical school graduates, and those from lower-ranked colleges were ridiculed and eventually stopped coming to work. There's a reason I've lasted 4 years here. I wanted to change Japan's ridiculous society, which values academic background and seniority. At work, being able to work quickly and accurately is the most important thing. Nothing else matters to the company or the customers. Even in medical schools, there's a significant difference in college rankings. But when you become a doctor, patients can't choose you based on whether you graduated from the University of Tokyo. And just because someone from the University of Tokyo is highly educated doesn't necessarily mean they'll do meticulous work or prioritize patient care. Japanese companies are still lagging behind the world. This is partly due to how we've been educated. But if we continue this way, the quality of Japanese work will keep declining. I thought things couldn't stay like this. I want to change Japanese companies and make Japan a country that continues to thrive as a developed nation. With such a passionate desire, I've endured being ridiculed by my superiors for 4 years in this company. Of course, being mocked daily can sometimes make a person feel negative. There were many times I thought about quitting because I couldn't change the company. However, some colleagues admired me despite the mockery from my bosses. Their support gave me the strength to keep going. I was saved many times by them. One of them was a graduate of a prestigious college, but they admired my quick and efficient work, and how I always left on time. Bosses often told me, "Don't leave before everyone else just because you're a high school grad." But I finished my work and the extra tasks dumped on me, and still left on time. They didn't like my attitude. Although I have ambitions to change the company, this is how Japan is. Living here means following Japanese rules. That realization disappointed me many times. I worked very fast. I arrived 15 minutes early, but finished my work faster than anyone else. Japan has countless unnecessary checks. Even when I was told to do pointless tasks, I didn't do them. Because they were pointless. If there's a clear reason for double checking, I don't skip it. But I thought, as in my previous job, there were too many unnecessary tasks. Without redundant checks, tasks are completed much faster. My quick work annoyed my bosses, who said things like, "You're cutting corners, aren't you? It's strange that you finish early. Or you're not doing the checks, are you?" This is why high school grads. Listen, regardless of what you think, this is the company's rule. If you can't follow the rules, we'll have to fire you. They probably saw my attitude as rebellious. In my previous job, I argued back and ruined relationships, so now I only respond when absolutely necessary. But I haven't made any mistakes. That's the point. It's too late after a mistake happens. I was shouted at. But I still thought there were too many unnecessary tasks, and there was no guarantee that doing them would prevent all mistakes. There were also excessive formalities in communication and documentation. Detail is important, but some female employees would change text colors and decorate notes just for sharing information. It only needs to be conveyed without errors. Unnecessary decorations aren't needed. I was appalled by middle-aged bosses who admired such unnecessary efforts. Some employees spend work time meticulously arranging office supplies. I thought, no wonder they end up working overtime. My means of stress relief remained reading. There are more and more places in Tokyo where cafes are combined with bookstores, and even hotels where you can read your favorite books. Bookstores are clean and comfortable. There is air conditioning in summer. It feels heavenly. Time flies while reading. I enjoyed buying my favorite books and reading them at home. Since reading is a solitary activity, I didn't get a girlfriend or make many friends. Reading is a solo pursuit. Still, thanks to reading, my life was fulfilling. And on Monday, the days of being ridiculed at work would begin again. I believed I was the most capable worker in the company. However, with my high school diploma and cocky attitude, I thought I would never get promoted here. As the end of the year approached, the company's annual year-end party was coming up. I was feeling gloomy. I didn't have any close friends at work, and drinking with people I didn't like wasn't enjoyable. I would rather go home early and read a new book. But skipping the year-end party wasn't really an option unless there was a very good reason. And both Kenneth and my manager, Kyle, had reminded me beforehand. At the year-end party, your job as a high school grad is to entertain Mr. Kimball. Mr. Kimball's mood depends on you. I wondered why it had to be me, but I understood the reason at the party. Mr. Kimball was a graduate of a famous college, and that was his status symbol. That's why our company was such an academic meritocracy. And the reason why Mr. Kimball's mood depended on me. He needed someone to look down on and mock. Most of the high school and technical school graduates had already left the company because of the intense pressure from the bosses. I was a valuable target to entertain Mr. Kimball. At the party, I was seated next to Mr. Kimball. Thomas, you're lucky. You're sitting next to Mr. Kimball. This is something a high school grad like you will never experience again. Kyle, sitting across from me, said. I disliked Kyle, who was kissing up to Mr. Kimball, probably aiming to be the next president. Mr. Kimball, this guy's a high school grad. He's always so difficult to deal with. Kyle and my other bosses mocked me in front of Mr. Kimball. Well, it can't be helped. Those without an education are too dumb to follow orders. It's hard for me to understand. Since I graduated from a famous college. Of course, I was very irritated, but I endured it, thinking this irritation would end today. Your name is Thomas, right? You should listen to the smart people. I'd like to see how smart you are. Mr. Kimball scanned the room. Hey, Thomas, go hit on that blonde woman over there in English. If you succeed, you can leave the party and take her home. A stupid game. Mr. Kimball knew I wouldn't be able to do it and wanted to embarrass me. Making everyone laugh at my expense to liven up the party was one option. I hesitated for a moment. Go on, Kyle next to me pushed me forward. I approached the blonde woman. Hello, how are you? Hi, how are you? As I spoke to her, I could hear the murmurs from Mr. Kimball and the others. Thomas is giving it a try. But even a middle schooler can say hello, how are you? Indeed. I continued the conversation. My name is Kenneth. What is your name? My name is Mally. Where are you from? I'm from the US, but I've been living in Tokyo for 3 years. Oh, really? Well, are you unattached? Currently, yes. Can you drink beer together at a bar? Sure. I didn't expect my attempt to pick her up to go so smoothly, but it worked out easily. Mr. Kimball and the others probably didn't understand our conversation. After all, my English pronunciation is almost native. Mr. Kimball was left speechless. Kyle, with a red face, said angrily, You embarrassed Mr. Kimball just because you can speak English. Since I successfully hit on her in English, I'm going to take the beautiful lady out. Excuse me. I could hear the bosses telling me to read the room, but I ignored them and left the venue with the lady. She was with a group of 3, but they were all just about to leave. We went into a stylish bar nearby. I can speak Japanese. Mally said to me. Sorry for suddenly dragging you to a bar. I explained the details of the situation. So it's like a penalty game? Are you not interested in me? Mally said. No, it's not like that. I am interested in you. I thought you were beautiful from the moment I saw you. I want to know more about you. Japanese people don't hit on others much, so I was surprised. Mally said, but as we talked, we became closer. Having lived in the US, we had a lot to discuss about the differences between Japanese and American culture. We would be off for the New Year's holidays right after the year-end party. I often invited Mally out for drinks during the holidays. Then the day to return to work after the New Year's break came. I felt gloomy. It was my first day back at work after embarrassing Mr. Kimball at the year-end party. But I went to work anyway. You don't have a desk anymore. Kyle said, looking at me. I knew it. I had been fired. I felt devastated, wondering what I had worked so hard for over the past 4 years, and cried loudly when I got home. It was a shock. To be fired so easily. I had colleagues who admired me, but they would continue working at that company. I couldn't move on right away and called the HR department. A woman answered. This is Thomas. I was fired today without a valid reason, and I'm not satisfied with that. I said, and the woman replied coldly, You're Thomas, right? You graduated from Harvard, didn't you? We've been informed of your false credentials. That's right, I went to Harvard after graduating from high school. It wasn't exactly false credentials. I had a reason for not listing it on my resume. I had a bad experience at my previous job because of it. It's not really false credentials, I just didn't list one of my qualifications, and I have a reason for that. But that's still a lie, isn't it? Her response was very cold. She was probably instructed to respond that way. Realizing that further conversation would be pointless, I hung up. So even Mr. Kimball, who likes highly educated people, hates me because I embarrassed him. I muttered to myself. Oh, damn, what should I do now? I couldn't stop talking to myself. At that moment, I thought of calling Mally. When I told her I got fired, she invited me to dinner. Thomas, you got fired? Yeah. Why? There are many strict rules in Japanese companies. When I said that, Mally seemed to understand. I'm also tired of Japan. There was a brief silence, then, Thomas, you can speak English, right? I have a friend who works in trade. I'll introduce you. Being fluent in English, the idea of working in trade was appealing. Please, I'd appreciate an introduction. I told Mally. A few days later, I met Mally's American friend, Mr. Smith, who worked in trade in Japan, at a cafe. We hit it off, and he first asked why I could speak English so well. When I told him I went to Harvard after high school, he was very surprised. I got into Harvard thanks to books. Since I loved books as a child, studying wasn't painful for me. The same went for English, I learned it naturally because I loved reading. The desire to attend Harvard also came from a book. I read one book in high school. I forgot the title, but it said if you want to change your life, go to Harvard. Although it was a high achievement, and I was anxious about living in the US, when I told my mother I wanted to go to Harvard, she surprisingly supported me. Thomas, you've always been a good kid and easy to raise. Thank you so much. I'll support you as much as I can, my mother said. Of course, my school teachers said, we want to help, but we've never had a student go to Harvard, so we don't know how to assist you. But my mother had meetings with my homeroom teacher, Mr. Thompson, and asked Mr. Sanders to prepare the necessary documents, and finally, through our efforts, I got accepted. When I got in, even Mr. Thompson shed tears of joy. The hardest part was convincing my father. He was against it. He questioned the point of spending so much money on an education without a clear goal. My reason for wanting to go to Harvard, written in a book, didn't seem convincing to him. But showing good grades on mock exams and my teamwork with my mother moved him. Seeing us pursue our dreams, he eventually felt compelled to support us by the summer of my senior year, according to my mother. Thanks to our efforts, I achieved my dream. Honestly, attending Harvard wasn't my long-standing dream. But encountering that book gave me a dream, and with the support of those around me, it came true. The desire to achieve something usually arises from what one feels capable of doing. Thus began my life in the US. Harvard is in Boston, quite an urban area. At Harvard, there were not only Americans but also people from overseas like me, which made the environment very enjoyable. Although I studied English, I initially lacked confidence in my pronunciation and felt nervous meeting people. But everyone was kind. I thought I had to be the one to initiate conversations to fit in, but my classmates were quite proactive in reaching out, and as days went by, I grew closer to everyone. I became particularly close with a student from Saudi Arabia. His different religion made our friendship very interesting. It felt like my world was expanding. We even traveled to New York together. New York was very stimulating and dazzling to me at the time. We watched a Broadway musical. To save money, I always ate burgers when we went out. I also experienced love. It was with an American. We dated in college but broke up before graduation. The reason was that I spent too much time on books and couldn't prioritize our relationship. At that time, I decided that if I ever fell in love again, it would be with someone more independent. Living in the US was challenging due to cultural differences, but it was very fulfilling. I often visited the company run by the father of an American friend I had gotten close to. He also wanted to go into business in the future, so he frequently visited his father's company. During those visits, I learned a bit about American companies. Everyone left work on time. They didn't wait for their bosses after finishing their work and enjoyed their time after work. They minimized unnecessary tasks to the extreme. I graduated from Harvard a year later than usual. Graduating from Harvard normally is indeed challenging. At graduation, I had mixed feelings about staying in the US. But my strong desire to change Japan led me to return and seek employment in a Japanese company. With a Harvard degree, job hunting wasn't difficult. Since I could use English, I thought a trading company would be a good fit and joined one. There, I learned that the values I had cultivated abroad didn't apply in Japan. From the beginning, my Harvard degree made people distance themselves from me. When I heard the rumors about me, it was like, Thomas seems out of place because he lived abroad. I know. It feels like he doesn't want to associate with Japanese people. Thomas? Oh, the Harvard grad? He's a bit odd. It feels like he looks down on Japan. They saw me as an outsider who looked down on Japan. Japan is a society where you must conform to others. If you stand out, you get criticized. I wasn't looking down on Japan, I just had a passionate desire to improve Japanese companies. There were also rumors about me leaving before my bosses. Of course, I would say my greetings when leaving, but I didn't ask, is there any other work left? I left because my work was done. That's natural. Why should I help slow bosses with their work? That's what I thought. Admittedly, I lacked teamwork. But that didn't warrant bad-mouthing. I thought I stood out because of my Harvard degree. If being discriminated against or standing out because of my education was a problem, it was better not to mention it. That's what I thought. People avoided interacting with me, and I missed out on important work communications, which affected my job performance. Eventually, my mental health suffered, and I quit the trading company. For a year, I didn't work. Or rather, I couldn't. I didn't want to do anything and was lethargic. Comparing my current state to my memories of American life made it painful. I think seeing lively people in American companies and then working in Japanese companies with the intent to change them but then facing a reality far from my ideal caused the gap between my expectations and reality, which eventually strained my mental health. What did I do? Of course, I read books. At that time, I was hooked on IT, so I read many books on that subject. A year later, I joined an IT company. It was the company I got fired from recently. On my resume, I didn't list my Harvard degree, only my high school diploma. After telling my story, Mr. Smith said, "What a waste. Having a Harvard degree but not utilizing your potential is really a waste." Mr. Smith said. But in Japan, my way of thinking isn't accepted. When I said that, Mr. Smith replied, "I understand." Having someone who understood me was a relief. Mr. Smith then said, "Why don't you work at my company? There are many Japanese employees, but the work environment is more like America." I am the president. I saw hope. My goal was to change the way people work in Japan, but after getting fired, I realized it wasn't feasible in the current climate. As the saying goes, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Japan has its own way of doing things. If I wanted to work my way, I'd have to start my own company. Mr. Smith's offer seemed like the best option for me at the moment. "Yes, I'd love to work with you," I replied. "Then, there's training involved, so can you start tomorrow?" "Yes, of course," I answered eagerly. Thus, a new chapter of my life began the next day. I first toured the company, and given my Harvard degree in native-level English, I started with handling phone calls and emails. I could tell I was thriving in this company. It reaffirmed that people have environments where they do and don't fit. While it's possible to endure and strive in a challenging environment, finding a place that suits you without pushing your limits is important. As I got used to the work, I was entrusted with tasks like shipping, delivery management, and transportation arrangements. The company had a clear distinction between work and personal time, and my private life became even more fulfilling. My personal life no longer revolved solely around reading. Yes, I started dating Mally. It seemed I was better suited for relationships with foreigners. Japanese women had often criticized me for not being considerate enough. Spending time with Mally was a joy, and my reading time decreased. This surprised me. I never imagined meeting someone who could take precedence over reading, which was my life. I was deeply moved by this. We visited theme parks, and since Mally was a foreigner, she loved temples and shrines, and we enjoyed collecting temple seals together. We also visited Kyoto, which Mally had always wanted to see. I liked Kyoto too, but visiting with Mally brought many new discoveries. If I visited alone, I might have overlooked some buildings and signs. Everyday life and environments became exponentially more enjoyable with Mally. Mally often joked, "Thomas, you got fired because you met me." Taken out of context, I might have been unlucky at that time. But meeting Mally led me to a job I truly wanted and someone who became more important than reading. Now, I'm very happy. Mr. Smith also valued my work in native level English, treating me well as his subordinate. He often took me out for drinks after work. After getting fired from that previous company, my life turned around. No matter how much I wanted to change that company and aimed for a promotion, I would always be ridiculed as a high school grad and never get promoted there. 2 years after starting to date Mally, she told me she had something important to discuss. I live with Mally now. We had canceled our previous leases and rented a new place with 2 rooms. "Thomas, I want to go back to the US," Mally said. At first, I wasn't sure if this meant she wanted to break up or if she wanted me to go with her. I froze, unsure of how to respond. "If you'd like, Thomas, why don't we live together in the US?" I thought for a moment and said, "Of course, I'd love to, but things are going well with Mr. Smith's job. And it's hard for Japanese people to get an American visa. With a tourist visa, I can only stay for 3 months. Then let's get married. That way, there won't be any visa issues." I was surprised by the sudden mention of marriage. "Thomas, do you not want to get married?" "It's not that I don't want to. I do, but I always thought it would be someday. I'm just surprised it's now." "So you do want to? Then let's do it." And so, we decided to move to the US about 6 months later. Even though marriage would help with the visa, it's still challenging to get an American visa, so I planned to attend a school for the first year. When I told Mr. Smith about it, he said, "I'm staying in Japan, so you can always come back if you want." "Mr. Smith, aren't you going back to the US?" When I asked, he said, "I have a Japanese wife." That was news to me. "Wow, I didn't know. Why didn't you tell me before?" When I asked, Mr. Smith laughed and said, "I thought I had mentioned it." But he understood my decision to leave the job in 6 months. In this aspect too, Japanese companies make it hard to leave, so I thought that Mr. Smith was truly an American. Mr. Smith's American attitude respected personal circumstances. So, I planned to visit my parents with Mally. It would be the first time bringing Mally to my parents' house. And I was nervous about how they'd react to our international marriage and our plan to move to the US. My mother had been supportive when I went to Harvard, so I thought she'd understand, but I was worried about my father. We had a hotel lunch booked for our first meeting. Moreover, Mally wanted to wear a kimono, so we rented one, and she got dressed and had her hair and makeup done. Mally, with her blonde hair and blue eyes, was already stunning, and the kimono made her even more radiant. She looked beautiful. When we arrived at the hotel, my parents were already there. Seeing Mally, my mother immediately said, "Oh, she's so beautiful," which made Mally happy and eased my tension a bit. My father's face remained expressionless, and I couldn't tell what he was thinking. "We're getting married and will live in California, where her family is, in 6 months," I said. My mother, looking happy, said, "As long as you are happy, that's all that matters." My father just said, "Dad, do you approve?" I confirmed. "Yeah, you're lucky to have such a beautiful bride," he said. My mother added, "Both your father and I don't oppose it." Once you make up your mind, you always go through with it, don't you? Hearing this, I was touched by my parents' greatness. Mally, not understanding the indirect Japanese conversation, whispered, "Are your parents okay with it?" I smiled and said, "Yes, they're both okay with it." We enjoyed the kaiseki meal. Though Mally had been living in Japan, it was her first time trying kaiseki cuisine, and she was delighted. She was excitedly asking, "What's this?" while eating. After lunch, we went to my parents' house. "There's not much, but please relax," my mother said, preparing green tea and Japanese sweets for us. We spent a few enjoyable days and then returned to our place. We are now preparing to move to the US. Initially, we'll live at Mally's family home for a while. My plans have changed significantly. I wanted to change Japanese companies. But now, I want to live in the US. Some might think I lack direction, but as I read my books, I realized that life doesn't always go according to plan. That's just how it is.